Okay, we are live, so we shall call the meeting to order. The approval of the agenda and order of business, any additions? Hopefully not, because I'm trying to get out of here in reasonable timing. We're already got a bunch of stuff on here that's going to take us longer than I ever thought it was.
We approve the agenda.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion carried. Minutes of the previous meeting, errors or omissions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion carried. Public presentations, I'm unaware of any. So I'm assuming there are none. Okay. 6.1, request for direction for infrastructure operation, J-Class Road evaluation list. That won't be so fast, I imagine. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
A lot of small print here.
I know, I put it there, look at 17.
Yeah,
So
she's to buy magnifying glasses.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, council. Thanks for your kind attention. This is part 2 of the discussion that was started on the 20th of October. Basically the spreadsheets that were provided in the package are the result of the matrix that was discussed and tweaked. And so we have the sort of the top 10. It's the same information on all of them. It looks like a lot, but it's the same information in 3 different ways. So there's the expanded version, which, if you recall, we were looking at the longer roads were split into more manageable chunks to see if we could get some efficiencies there or be specific. There's the condensed version, which is basically a lump together that we're familiar with from years gone by, and then we split it out into each individual district again. In terms of the information and the results, it's all the same on each of the ones. So really, we're just here to find out if this list is okay as presented, or whether there will be executive decisions made in terms of applying further discussion to the
Based on the new criteria that we sort of approved.
yes.
Where's the list?
Correct, Rick.
What?
Read it from the group.
Yeah, but
Oh,
So
it's in you.
Yeah.
the list is here. So this is the finalized.
First one.
So on the top of each one, it should say one should say J-Class Road expanded list. One should be J-Class Road condensed list, and then it should have District 1, District 2, District 3, and so on.
I have a question. I don't know. How come that the paved roads were included in this? Because they don't, I'm sorry, the gravel roads, excuse me, the gravel J-Class roads? Because I see a lot of them there,
Yeah.
but from what I understand, they're not involved in this program.
There seemed to be some confusion as to whether the gravel
Yeah.
roads were included or not. And we originally were under the impression that they weren't, because they weren't paved with an asphalt surface, then they wouldn't be paved with an asphalt surface if they were gravel. We were making the assumption that it was a like-for-like upgrade. But we've since learned that gravel roads can be upgraded to an asphalt surface.
Okay.
So that's why we've now included them in this list.
well,
Okay.
that's interesting. 'Cause
That,
They
there's
were
a lot of
not,
information.
they are not, are
Provided they're on the
they?
J.
Provided they're on the J-Class.
Exactly,
list,
yes,
Given to
yeah.
us by the problems as part of service.
And that's what I was getting at, because once they're not on there, they're not on there. They're not in that, they're not in that agreement.
Service exchange.
Yeah.
And that's perfect. So
Because that'll be interesting.
that's clear.
Stanford Lake going forward and maybe down the road.
Well, that's right. That's why those roads that somebody asked me about will never be a quick candidate because you're not in this agreement.
They're not in the.
And they're not in the
That's
agreement.
correct. Yeah, this is the definitive list as it stands at the
The
moment.
definitive on the list that we're have responsibility for. So what does people have to say?
I just.
Because I have none on one. My district.
Explain to me from these lists, I did have trouble
Yeah,
figuring it out. It got mixed up after a while. Option A and option B, based on the list as presented, based on the list as amended.
So,
Give me the difference.
okay, so as presented as in the, if we look at the condensed list, we're saying, are you happy for us to submit the top 10 on the condensed list to the province for consideration for upgrades next year? If it's to be amended, and that's sort of the broader discussion here. If the top 10 list is to be changed, if there's some debate as to whether some roads that aren't currently in the top 10 should be, then we will go away, make those changes, and then submit that amended list. So the A is what we have here in front of you.
Three is the.
And the
Yeah, this
B
is
is if there's any discussion, if there's any changes as a result of this presentation.
So if I'm looking, when I'm looking at this. Top one starts off, figures, Old Country, Old Country, Old Country, Old Country.
Right, that's the expanded list.
That's the expanded.
Yeah. If you look at the
So that's
condensed,
not as presented or as amended.
no, that's just as it is. Well, this is as presented. But that one that you're looking at there with it all split out into the different, the same road, but different, the Pigloop will be in 3 sections. We wouldn't present that to the NSDPW. We would present the condensed version.
Which is on page 14. It starts on page 20.
Condensed,
Sorry,
okay.
Page 14. Yeah, 22.
going,
Page 22 is back.
should be that, is it that one? Is that obvious? Sorry. If the top of that, it says Pig Loop, Oak Trunk 3, Valley Road, Queen Street.
It doesn't say anywhere on this that this is the amended list.
It's at the top of page, condensed
J
class list, and this is page 14.
Look at page 14, so
Right up here, the top left-hand corner.
It's not,
Oh,
it's
it
not
doesn't
on
say.
my list either.
It's not on
It's
mine
not
either.
on the paper copy.
Not on my paper copy.
It was on. the
Sorry,
bottom
it's
of the
just-
page.
Yeah, I don't
It's
have
on
them
the
on mine.
previous page, it just hasn't slipped over into the,
Okay.
so that, this one here, that title, should be on top of that. So there we are, there's the top 10, so that's the condensed list, which we're saying, if it's an amended, if it's to be accepted, that would go to NSDPW.
So what are we returning next week for then with the final top 10 based on this? You want us to amend this list?
No, not necessarily. If you're happy with this list, then this list will
Will
be,
be what we submit.
yes. If you want to have a discussion as to whether other roads are more worthy to be in that top 10 list to be submitted, then that's what we'll deal with now and make the changes accordingly.
And where's the calculation of the number of points this gets? Maybe the microphone.
But I'll show you.
Is this right here?
The number of the final total is here, so the total
Here's Chester.
weighted score. Should be
Way down.
This is column. I think the first kind of beige column.
This one over here.
Yeah. That's the one that.
I mean, I got tons of
It's
mine
a-
here, but I don't know. I've got it done, right?
Yes, Andre.
All right. So recognizing, of course, that we've sort of quasi agreed to this scoring system. We're in a situation where in the 90s, just as a by way of refresher for anybody who may be watching. In the 90s, this agreement was struck where there's some sort of cost share agreement, and there are many J-class roads, as you can see in this list here, 60s. The cost roads that we have, and they're basically, many of them, many are in a poor state of repair. And it's sort of like, by way of analogy, it'd be like having many, many houses around you on fire, and then somebody handing you a bucket of water and asking you which one you want to throw it on. That's the situation we find ourselves in. So we've come up with some sort of scoring mechanism to, if you will, try to take the politics out of it. And let's just do that. But in reality, the politics are important, because even this week I received like a phone call about a particular road in my district that's in poor condition, which isn't on the top of this list.
Yeah.
So let's say there was another road in my district that was higher. Would I prefer to have that one done first when all of the comments I get from the public are for a different one? Does that make sense? If you have two roads side by side, one everybody calls about, one nobody calls about, but the one that nobody calls about, it has a higher score. Should we do that one first? Is that what the public wants us to do? I would argue they do not. You know, this is the reason, for example, why in our grants program, we make decisions, because we have a feel for what's important in our community. And if it wasn't that way, then we would just simply give this to staff. You guys would select the roads and you kind of keep us apprised, and it would just happen. The reason why it's here is because there is a political aspect to this, because some roads are important. For example, one road I know is in abysmal condition is Walker Road. Terrible condition. It's in my district. I don't get any calls about that road ever. But I get calls all the time about Chester Downs Road. That's the facts. And it's been worsened because 5 years ago, for whatever reason, a road that you can see from Chester Downs Road, Island View subdivision, all those road networks were done like 5 years ago, and it was in better condition. I don't know how that even happened. I don't know. There obviously was no scoring at that time, but somehow that road got done. So it's only enraged those people more. So that's the situation. I'm not going to support any of this. I won't, because it makes no sense to me in my district. That's the situation. It's no fault of staff. They're trying to do what they think is best. But that's the situation I find myself in here. We got tons of roads, tons of roads that need to be dealt with right now. We haven't got enough cooperation from the province to deal with them all. And we have to somehow pick one that's gonna make the most people happy that we can. And I can just tell you that nothing on this list that I see is gonna make anybody happy that calls me. So am I in favor? Absolutely not. I will vote against it when the time comes, because it doesn't reflect what I'm hearing in my community.
So you'd like to have your road moved up further west, obviously?
Honestly,
Yeah.
because that's the one that everybody calls me about. And it's like rank 20.
Is there another one there in your community that's on the list?
Well, Walker Road, for example, well, I don't even know, there's so many lists here.
Walker's not.
Not even, no, sorry, maybe Stevens Road is what I meant to say.
You meant to say Stephen.
I meant to, yeah, not that.
Thank
So do you want
I was going to
Stevens?
correct you. but
Thank you.
So Stevens is on the top 10?
No.
It's in the 12th.
No, and you know what? You can barely drive a bicycle up that road.
And probably it's our criteria, because it's not a lot of houses. I think I counted 7 or 8 houses on that road.
Sure.
But it is of all, and I've driven most of these roads over the last couple of weeks just to get a sense. And that's got to be the worst. I think it's worse than the Chester Downs.
Yes, it is worse than Chester Downs, but nobody calls me about that one.
Or whatever.
That's the
Yeah.
issue.
Yes, Gary.
I have to admit, I had difficulty figuring out what was before us. And I think if you're going to present something to us, it's got to be readable. This print is just, for me, my eyes aren't that great. I can't have the smallest font you can find and put on this. It's got to be. But now that I see it, I agree with number 1. Yeah, so I'm going to start off with a positive. I think that is taking my district and a little bit about
Number 1 being Pig Loop.
Pig Loop.
Yep.
Clearly number 1. Right?
And that's a piece of Pig Loop that we're suggesting?
No, that's in its
The entirety.
entirety.
And that's in
Well,
another.
that's all the money, though.
But Big Loop is on another program, right, for other funding, am I right, Mr. CAO? Isn't the Big Loop on another program that we're looking at, or?
We have
This request for decision relates to the road surface and
Well, the other
improving the
one's
road
sidewalks.
surface. The other program is our active
That's
transportation
one, yeah.
intentions for Pig Loop Road.
Yeah.
And so there has been approval, we just haven't determined what the active transportation solution is for Pig Loop Road.
Because there are 5 options that we're looking at as far as how we're going to do it. Sidewalk, where it's going to be, one way, all those questions that we were looking at.
The traffic study was the third initiative that identified potential changes to the way that Pig Loop Road works, that would have influence both on paving and an active transportation solution.
But, yeah, so that was part of that other program. I know I saw a number of 1.6 million.
Yeah.
That was in a potential budget to do the work on Pig Loop.
Yeah.
Did that include paving it? Dan?
The funding is for active transportation. The solution may be paved shoulders, as an example. It may be sidewalk and paved shoulders. That hasn't been determined. But it would not be for the road surface. It would be like the shoulder of the road or the right of way adjacent to the road, not the road surface. Yeah.
Part of the reason we haven't been doing pieces of Pig Loop is because depending on whether we get that, we may change it somewhat.
Understood. But
We
I'm just
don't
saying,
wanna waste the
from the
money.
point of view
Exactly,
of,
that makes sense.
from the point of view of priorities, I see, I consider Pig Loop to be number 1. So I have no quarrel with that. But I know we had a presentation here from people in Walker Road, and they were 5th at one point.
Yeah.
And we committed to them that we would make this happen.
Try to do something.
Now it's 20, now it's 29.
Yeah.
Not saying it shouldn't be 29, no, I'm just saying we have a bit of a contradiction there in what we always said to the people. in Walker.
Yeah.
I do not believe the Commons Loop is fairly represented on this, and so far down the list, I think that's been an area that's been sort of, in my view, under service for some time, and I want to take a look at this in detail, now that I know which one I'm looking at. So I'm not in agreement with it at this point, because I don't fully understand how one road, just take an example, can go from 5 to 29 with tweaking of the criteria. I just want to look at the criteria again. And I do believe, I just mentioned a couple, I don't want to do each one by each, but Commons Loop clearly in my mind will come far ahead of some of these others that are in front of it. So it's based on our criteria. I mean, you apply the criteria, I understand that.
That's all we can do.
So what's wrong with our criteria, that the ones that we think? And mine is not political, in the sense that, everybody is complaining about the roads, and we know that, their road, unless it's been recently paved.
So the condition, Derek, maybe has to have a higher rating.
Well, I think, I want to,
Yeah, a higher rate, obviously more than what it is now.
I know we have a timeline
Yeah.
to make our priorities known, correct? Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. And the timeline is when?
End of November.
Not far,
So
couple of weeks.
2 weeks. So, I mean, I think we need to take a look at this, and, but I don't know which list. I guess the condensed list is the one that I'd like to take as the list to look at, but I'm not prepared to agree to this list at this point until I go back and have an opportunity to look at the criteria again and see how these decisions were made, and I think it's in the criteria.
Mhm.
You simply apply the formula.
Lloyd and then Andre.
A lot of information, and I think you sort of did what we asked.
Mhm.
Well, I'm just making a comment, but you did what we asked, and come back with some options and some criteria and each by district, which I appreciate. I now understand completely what my district looks like. I think we can still use, we may be able to tweak it, whatever the criteria, but I think we can do that and have our list. We're still 7 councils here can make a decision. I don't think that has to be the final list. I think if to Andre's point, if he wants to, when we making this decision and next week or week after, if he wants to bring a particular road out to put an argument up to council, that should be on the list this year. I have no problem with that personally. I always believe the council said here, we should be able to make decisions, not totally based on everything that we see in front of us, but there is a human side to it. And I think that's a good thing personally. Something else I think we have to consider, our budget and how much the province is putting in this and the reality of what we can actually do this year. And reality is not a lot, in my mind anyway. There's 2 million for the whole province and we put so much in and it's not on our end, it's the other end. So I think we have to base some of our decision on how we're looking at it totally
In the
on
real
that,
world.
on the real world and what kind of funding we have. Anyway, I want to thank you for your report. And I think you did a great job. There was a lot of information there. And to Andre's point, I agree. There should be some decision making at this table if that's the way we want to go on a particular thing.
Andre,
I just want us to summarize and try to, I think the issue here is that there are so many roads that are in poor condition. We're trying to make subtle differentiations between levels of badness. That's the challenge. Like, it's not like when we say this one doesn't deserve to be, it's not like we're saying that's good. It's just saying it's slightly less bad than the one next to it. And that's, I think, in a nutshell, that's why we're struggling, because we see, I'm getting complaints about this particular road and there may be 20 above it. It's not to say that it's not bad at all. It's very bad. It just, by these metrics, these ones are slightly, ever so slightly worse.
Yeah.
And that's the reality we're living in here right now.
One more question, if I may. This doesn't account for roads that can't be paved without structural work. For example, even though we serving on Walker Road, everybody agreed that we couldn't just go and pave that. There has to be structural work done that the province has to do first. So how would that, say, one of these roads, I'll take Collins Loop as another example, needs a lot of work, but it needs structural work, it needs widening, it needs ditching, it needs to be rebuilt. So how do we put that factor into this equation? Because Walker Road is not going to happen if we put it number one unless they put the money into the structural work.
I would just jump and say we haven't really, I don't think. The program that's available to us is a resurfacing program.
Resurfacing, that's what
Right, that's the program.
Yes.
Now, if I'm incorrect, if we did include the subsurface in our criteria, then I think we need to clarify that. We don't own these roads. And the program is just a resurfacing program. I think there, maybe when a road is approved, I'll probably get Manny or Tammy to jump in. If there's an opportunity to improve the subsurface, I think maybe it's taken, but it's not included in, it's not a road rebuilding program, it's a road resurfacing program.
So how do we distinguish between?
We have, I don't know, have we
Can
in this?
No, we have, in terms of more structural work that's needed on Walker Road, for example, no, that doesn't form part of this.
because we aren't responsible to pay for that.
Would that be something that the province would do to prepare the road and then we cost share on the resurfacing, but they do that?
Well, that's what's
work,
supposed to happen, but we can't make them do it.
no point in resurfacing here.
No,
Until we fix the underlying.
exactly. I agree.
Okay.
From our meeting with TIR a month ago, I recall the rep explaining that once they receive our list of priorities, then they examine those proposed roads, and if on their end, if it requires other additional work above resurfacing, then they
They make that.
they make that decision whether they want to undertake that.
Yeah.
And if not, they'll just drop down to the next one on the list or whatever.
Because they'll say they can't do it. It doesn't say.
Some of these smaller roads we used to do years ago, didn't we do a 50/50 cost share program? With the owners of the road at one point, that they could actually, like if he had a small road in his area district, that was a small road that the municipality would pay half and the owner would, we had something like that.
Not on provincial roads. We might have done
On
something.
private.
On private roads, we offer them,
road
they can
section.
borrow money from us and do
I
it.
thought we had a cost. share.
No, not.
I just wondered
on
if we-
provincial roads. no.
This was a way to address maybe some of these smaller roads with a program like that, because we're never gonna get these roads done. We're gonna
Yeah,
sit
no, but if we
down.
take over roads that we aren't responsible for,
No, I'm not saying take them down.
yeah. Because that's all part of the service exchange that we're in the middle of.
I know exactly that. I could read your mind. I think that's, I think Dan was probably, not to put words in your mouth, but probably gonna say that that's something that you guys are looking at. But, you know, that could be a ways out. The rate at which roads are deteriorating is faster than the rate at which we're trying to resurface. That's why we're here in this problem, bickering about which bad road to try to fix up.
Well, somehow we have to put together a list, and it doesn't appear as though we're ready for it right this minute. I don't.
Well, the reality is, if we put Pig Loop on there, that's
Then there's
gonna take
nothing
it
else.
all.
Well, there's not even enough money to do people.
Exactly, even with the whole
Even if we do
province.
the whole-
It's the whole province's budget, so I
I
don't know
think the
how.
1.6 just wasn't for resurfacing. People, I think the 1.6 that we talked about was for a lot of other work. I thought it would be 1.6 just to resurface.
I think this is just resurfacing.
It's just resurfacing.
This
It's
is,
a
this
long
is just
road.
about resurfacing.
This is just
They-
resurfacing.
I understand this is just for resurfacing.
Okay,
Although the other study we had done,
that's a whole different bunch of
I
money.
know, but that was for the 1.6 million came in. It wasn't just for resurfacing when they looked at. What was the program again, Dan? You mentioned. what?
It's so I'll use your number, that the amount approved was for active transportation.
Yeah.
So not road surfacing, it was for probably, shoulders, so it could be asphalt shoulders, it could be sidewalk, could be a combination of those things.
That's what I.
But the funding is not to be used to repave the road,
Right. So
it's
that's
to
a different
provide the
program.
active
Whole different
transportation.
problem.
That's right. So I don't want the 1.6, you say we take up the whole thing.
It would.
Well, but
The province only has 2 million in their budget.
they have one
One.
of it's ours. The other,
So it's one.
and
road.
1 million for all of Nova Scotia.
One,
We don't know what the cost of doing people would be if it was just resurfacing.
well, it's 1.121 million.
Take a look at what's the.
Which is more than the province has.
Or actually 560.
Yeah.
So do we eliminate something because it's the worst road?
All I'm saying is if we put it in, chances are we won't get it because it's too much of all of the province's money. And if we do get it, it's the only one we're ever going to get. That's just the reality.
So number 2 is the same thing. It's too much money. Number
Well,
3. same
Even
thing.
Valley, that's a quarter of the province's budget,
Yes.
one road.
So
Yes.
none of the first 8 we could consider because they're all too much money.
Well, I mean, in the real world, the chances of getting it aren't very good.
Let's keep going down the list then. Where's number 9?
So I just want to know, I have one road in mind and it's way down on the list. So I don't know if the people with the roads need to go set somewheres and pick out what's the top 10 are or what.
I mean, Derek and I have the most J-class roads in the.
Yes,
in the
that's correct.
municipality. But,
There's nothing here we can afford.
Well,
I
Down
didn't
to
say,
number 20, we still can't afford it. So what's the point of the exercise? Why don't we just pick out ones that we can afford, not the ones that are most in need?
Well, they probably would do a section of it. I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's
That's why, that's why.
You know,
did it.
we send it to them for them to make their decision, so I can't predict what their decision would be, but I think they have done that in the past. Where we submitted a road and they selected,
So
they looked at their
they
budget
determined.
and did approved repaving of as many meters as would be allowed by the budget. I think they've done that in the past. So again, just the three different groupings of roads. The first is the expanded list where sections of roads were evaluated separately. So in that road, you would see that a number of the roads are divided into different sections.
So that you can't
So
do
that's a
affordable
technique that council may wish to employ over the consolidated list. And the district-based is to allow you to look at various communities in your municipality. Maybe one, and so I would say that I think staff did achieve the assignment that we were given. We applied that technical lens. I think it's good work. We know the challenging work is for council. Maybe a technique is to select, endorse a method of evaluation, and then when you have to select your top 10 list, we come with the top quartile. We say these 50 road sections were in the top quartile, the worst of the worst, to Councillor Vino's point, and then you select from amongst them. That may be one that allows you to kind of honor a road rating system, but also to apply the knowledge that you have, but by that contact you have with your community members and that knowledge that you would have as an elected official. So that might be a technique. Is the next step is you maybe endorse the expanded J-class list, and next week we come back with the top 25% of those. And from those you select. So it's a bit of art and a bit of science. I think that's where we are, because the budget is so darn small that you have to apply a bit of art, that lens that you have representing your community. That may be a way that you can resolve this.
So when you say expanded, you mean the one as amended that he refers to as option?
I think that's prudent to divide those longest roads up into sections for a couple of reasons, because of the budget, but also because one section of a road may be far worse condition than another section of that very same road. So I think it has technical merit as well as realistic
And TIR would decide
advantages
which,
that are realistic.
would TIR decide which section?
No,
or-
we'll-
or that
We would
would-
submit the section. They've
Okay.
never selected a section that has not been on our top 10 list. In my memory, and I don't think they've ever selected anything other than in the order that we submitted, to my knowledge. So that may be a way that you can resolve both that art and science.
Yeah.
Do we need to be concerned with roads that need structural work? Because this is, as you said, it's for resurfacing. Do we get into that issue in this program?
Well, I think if staff identified what they thought was a catastrophic subsurface condition that would result in imminent failure of a road they just repaved, we probably would flag that for you. But if a road is approved and there's some subsurface, I think our team would work with Public Works, the province. But I don't. You re-asked the question.
We can go through this criteria.
I don't think we would be for this program. We would identify that this program is about the resurfacing.
We would let the Department of Transportation determine whether or not they
That's
felt it
it.
was worth
Thank you.
resurfacing.
I think they're gonna have their own criteria
Of
as
course
well.
they
It would
will.
be different than what our criteria might be. So for our staff to identify roads that would need subsurface work, they may not meet the criteria that TIR would have established.
We can still raise it, but we can still voice our opinion.
We already know some roads that we can't do because
They
they're
need-
not gonna pave roads that likely in the next number of years going to be rebuilt. Even though they're probably the worst ones, so I just don't know how you put that in. I'm thinking again of the common loop. That needs structural work, it needs widening, it needs ditching, it needs the whole 9 yards, it's totally been ignored. And I think it should be higher on our list. But resurface what's there doesn't make any sense. It has to be fixed, it's Walker Road has to be fixed. And I don't know how we factor that in, and maybe we don't. TIR do that once we say these are the priorities.
Yeah, and they would probably drop it off the list unless they intended it to work.
Yeah.
And to Derek's point, and we'll discuss, so I'm looking at the list here. And I'm just picking this as a gravel road, and it's Swinham Road in Western Shore. So to your point, so if this theoretically gets put on the list and it's not paved, but it could, as you say, it's kind of, I guess, a gray area if it's, so if the province accepts it as a 50-50 cost share, I would assume, because it hasn't been paved before, that before they pave it, they'll do the structural work, culverts, whatever they have to do there. I would assume, I mean, that's, and I, because of the source that I had and a reliable source that did exactly this, that they did all the infrastructure work before they paved it, because it was a gravel road. And it was a J class, and that's where I got into confusion about what was on the list and what was on
It's
it.
just that we don't pay for that. We pay for the.
No, but what I'm saying is, if the province chose to pick a road that we submitted, that was a gravel road, to have it surfaced, they would not just go in and surface the gravel road. They would do that infrastructure work. They wouldn't surface it from the start. Now something that surfaced, like Pig Loop or Walker, they would just pave it. That's what you're getting. We don't know, and it's senseless to do that. But I would say if we submitted the gravel road,
They would either do it or not. If
They would
if
do it.
weren't prepared to do the infrastructure work, they wouldn't.
they wouldn't do it. Absolutely, they would.
Yeah, going to back for my provincial colleagues, the other half of the money is from their budget. And they want to use that budget resource to its best to achieve as much as they possibly can. So I have confidence that they would not, and they actually tender the work and supervise the work as well. So I have confidence that they would not spend money on a road that they think is subject to imminent failure, that would be subject to an imminent failure. It's their budget too, and they want to achieve as much as they can for our communities.
One last comment. I just want to recognize that, like you said, this is a good report. This is what we asked for. And my only concern is it's difficult to read. And I should have come perhaps better prepared when I had difficulty understanding all these different criteria. That's why we talk about it, I guess. But I think is what we asked for. And I think
What we agreed to.
once we now understand it, I think it's a good report. It's just not something we're going to agree to because it doesn't fit what we see as priorities, and that's our criteria.
So what's the next step? I mean, we got to move on from there.
Yep.
Yeah, are we gonna pick a couple of roads and submit them, or do you want to,
We're gonna pick 10, correct?
Well, I think Dan's suggestion.
that they bring back the list that divides them into sections? Top 10, and then we decide, what are we doing?
Is that what you said, Dan?
Yeah, I think there's merit in the condensed, the expanded list that breaks out those major roads into sections based on their condition and their length.
Yeah.
That's, I guess I would recommend that's reasonable science. If you endorse that method of establishing the list, that's the first step. The second step then is we would come back with the top 25 quartile of those roads. I suppose without their scoring, and from amongst those, you would select 10 to submit for repaving
Based on their knowledge of the road.
so it's the top 25%. That's one
Did you say
approach.
based on our knowledge of the road, but also based on what's on cost to do it, because.
Yeah, because there's no point in submitting what you know you're not gonna get.
Very clear.
There's not a silver bullet here.
But we need to weigh this information when we make a decision. definitely.
Condition should be, just that you at least should be defend condition.
The defend condition.
Okay.
Okay, so you're coming back with that.
So just for interest, I guess. So Dan, your comments there were about the scoring. So, you know.
With or without the scoring is public information. You have the scoring. You would apply it to your decision making. It's just an attempt to try to narrow the list down. It's a suggestion. It's your decision, what method you'll use.
Well, if I may make a suggestion, sorry to
So no,
interrupt. I was just going to say, and to Councillor Wells's point about being, it's quite overwhelming the amount of information here, and I get that. But if we put together a summary of this that includes, the sections of each of the longer roads, the expanded list with its score and the estimated cost, would that be enough information to move to help you make decisions? You don't need to know that there's sort of the guts of it. It's just the highlights essentially. Would that be useful to you?
Okay, but I don't.
Now, so we do need to say yes or no to that question.
Just
Because
so we
when we
know
come
what to
back
bring.
the next time, because you spent a lot of time from the criteria and the scoring and the points. I mean, I sat here, I didn't participate because I had no stake in the game, but I'm sad because this took a lot of time. This is time that could have been
But it's a worthwhile exercise. I think the report is good to have. I think-
Worthwhile,
I think it's
but
an eye opener for all of us.
an eye opener for me.
So can he give us a shortened list? Come back.
So the top 25, the expanded list with the weighted score and anticipated cost.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's right, and the rest is politics.
But you're breaking it down into sections. You're going to break big loop down into sections. Is that the plan?
Yes.
But the top 10 are the top 10 with the highest rating.
We have the top 25 right in front of us.
Yeah, you do.
So if that's what we're doing, I'm still not happy. Because the road that I want isn't in the top 25 and it's a piece of junk.
Well,
I'll tell you what you need
you
to do.
rated
then.
it.
We won't make a decision today. If you want to make an argument to me, go out and do your homework, bring back pictures.
Come on, we'll go drive it.
But the bottom
We'll
line,
talk to these people.
What's the name of the street again?
Steve, and
Stevens?
I think Steve, this is Andre's district, so I shouldn't be speaking on this perhaps. But I think you all should drive Stevens Road. Isn't that the one that goes out? Right, that's more shape than Commons, isn't it? And then Downs.
Yeah, it's super bad.
I mean,
But it's not the one I even want.
no, okay,
It's terrible. That's one you can't pull a wagon up there. But that's not the one people call me about.
Well, then you're just gonna have to make the argument to add it to the top 10 list when we make the decision.
Whether it's one additional argument I can provide.
So did someone,
Forward their calls to you.
Well, you can move that it be number one and somebody will second it and we'll vote. I don't know.
That's applying your official election knowledge.
might move it to number 10, you're not giving them one.
We gotta do something. So we're gonna get the list and then bring it back? Yeah. Okay.
so was our staff going out and gave this evaluations to the road for the condition?
Of course they did.
A lot of
Well,
time.
there you go. You could.
I don't care. I don't care who was last on the list. This is the one they called me about.
This is the political side of Andre.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
No, but he's right, I mean, they're all bad.
No, we all got to serve.
And
You're clean as dirty.
I get a lot of roads in my district, they're all bad, but they're not on the list because they're not J-class, they can't do nothing about it.
well, you have another avenue,
Yeah. Yeah, try to get them on the provincial list of other things.
that's right.
Yeah, well, I do that. Okay. We're moving on. 6.2, see how we make up with that.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Must be nervous.
Hopefully this will be a little less controversial.
Well, one would hope.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
So this morning's presentation is on Social Tourism Cooperative's request for funding. Staff's recommendation is for council to approve Social Tourism Cooperative's ask of
$4,221.66 as a line item in the 2022-2023 budget. And for this line item funding to be incorporated in the annual economic development budget going forward. So this request for decision was prompted by the presentation done by Peter Cullen and Joanne Cooper on behalf of Social Tourism Cooperative in mid-September of this year. At the end of Social Tourism Cooperative's presentation, council requested further input from economic development staff, with Social Tourism Cooperative to provide a list of other regional funding partners as well as their budget. This presentation requested council support with operational funding via budgeted line item, opposed to the grant funding that they previously received. This request is not a new one from Social Tourism Cooperative, as they've requested line item funding in previous years. The municipality of Chester has contributed annually, usually in the form of a grant, as outlined in Table 1 of the RFP. Table 1 also shows how, apart from last year, annual contributions to Social Tourism Cooperative have been between $3,698 and $4,678 in the ballpark of what is currently being asked. As of October 2022, the 5 units acting in a board advisory capacity, Barrington, Shelburne, Bodle, Bridgewater, and Queens, have paid their dues as a line item, which you will see in Table 2. Table 3 aligns Social Tourism Cooperative's budget as requested by council. The reasons staff recommend Social Tourism Cooperative be funded as a budgeted line item include bringing together of industry, nonprofit, and other governmental organizations from across the region to collaborate. This regional collaboration bolsters provincial and federal funding applications. If we're a board advisor, then we give input on how the money is spent. Social Tourism Cooperative's role also fits within municipalities' promotion strategy, whereas Social Tourism markets the South Shore and the municipality of Chester within Nova Scotia and the wider Atlantic region. And we partner with Tourism Nova Scotia to market ourselves outside of the province in the Atlantic region. Lastly, Social Tourism does more than just marketing. They also receive funding from COA to do a labor force study, focusing on grassroots local lens. Preliminary findings show that employers need to support marginalized demographics to fill, such as persons with a disability, to fill the labor gaps. Our contribution will allow us to access the findings of the study, as well as the resources that they will provide, which we can share with businesses and other stakeholders within the municipality. So in summary, staff recommend council approves the Social Tourism Cooperative's request for $4,221.66 as a budgetary line item for 2022-2023, and direct staff to incorporate future funding requests from them into the economic development budget. Our other regional partners fund Social Tourism's line item that facilitates industry, nonprofit, and governmental collaboration. It helps market us, and as advisory member, we have say in how the money is spent. And while it's difficult to quantify the impact that Social Tourism has directly on the municipality of Chester, I think the regional marketing strategy gives weight to the saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that is important for us. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer.
Yes, Derek.
Thank you for your presentation. A couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm sure other people know the answers. On page 2 of your report, when we get into the other regions and their monetary contribution, we're near the top. What is the formula? Are everybody using the same formula? I obviously tell Lunenburg at home they aren't using formula.
So they're just a basic member. We would be a board advisory member, and it's
We'd be
based,
voting.
not a voting member, just an advisory member. So it's based on the old REN formula, so which is 20% equal distribution of costs, 40% population, and 40% uniform assessment.
I thought municipality Lunenburg was that much bigger than us, so there would be much more than ours. We're almost identical to them. They're much larger. I'm just wondering why.
That's a great question. Those are just the numbers that they provided me.
Is there any?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I
I have
would have-
another question.
Now I have the exact, I have that in front of me here, and I did read where that you indicated the former REN formula, but it is it's quite intriguing to me, puzzling, because I had the same red flag as Derek in terms of District of Lunenburg at 5703. We are looking at 4221 here. And I am, by the way, before we even get to the motion, I am in favor of the line item. I really am. I wasn't here for the presentation. Certainly was familiar with the presentation before they came in that day and so on, and the reasoning around it. So I am in favor of a line item for this group from us, but I am particularly puzzled around that formula piece and just would like to make sure that that is correct. Yes.
It doesn't seem to be right to me.
So are they obligated to use that formula in any, is there said
I think they adopted the formula just to give it a
guideline?
little more equal,
Okay.
just because the units are different, so.
Tina and I are, I think we're on the same page. We don't disagree with using the formula, but I can't see that
No.
properly calculated. If we're that
Properly applied formula.
Well, that's right.
calculated, I don't even know if it's calculated properly,
Yeah.
because if you take 40% population, 40% uniform assessment, and we're almost identical to municipal district of Lunenburg, it can't be right.
Because when I think back on the REN, not the RDA, but the REN,
Yeah.
I don't remember District of Lunenburg and District of Chester being so close with their financial investment, but there were others here at the table that would remember that as well in terms of the REN formula.
Staff can certainly verify the formula has been applied.
And that's what's
correctly. There's
council, so I
one-
think we could still.
It's almost 25% higher.
Yeah.
Number 1,500, that's 42, so that's about 25% higher than what I would be, and I'm not sure of the numbers, I agree, we should check them out, but
Yeah,
it is
I think
quite a
that'd
bit
be
higher,
fair.
25%.
Not sure your math is right, but anyway.
Well, I went 15, 30, 45, 60, we're around 45, they're around 57, or 42, in that range, 2020.
Yeah, our uniform assessment would be proportionately higher
Than theirs.
than the District of Lunenburg's. Our population is about half, and our equal shares would be the same. So I don't think it's likely to be too
I don't
far
think it's too
off.
far.
It's probably-
It may be correct,
Maybe-
we're just
I don't
think it's too far.
questioning the numbers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we could certainly verify that if that's the method that you approve.
I expect it to be correct,
Yeah.
based on that type of formula.
I just
Yeah.
raised the
All right.
question.
I believe that we approved that edited line item.
I think we should participate.
I
That's not a
agree,
question.
I agree, we should participate.
We have a second
Make
for
sure
the
the
motion.
calculations are
We have a seconder for the motion to approve, but
Second.
discussion.
Yes, discussion, please. So when it comes to the vote, I'll decide what I'm gonna do, but I am in full favor of a line item, and I want to make that clear. I have been for a long time. I want clarification around what we are approving for an amount, and I'm not comfortable saying yes to a motion for 4221 decimal, whatever it is. So I just want,
Well, let's make the motion
Subject to.
What's a motion?
subject to
Okay.
the formula being
Okay.
correct.
okay,
Someone check and bring us back that.
Yeah.
My question
Okay.
for Olivia, if this amount were $8,000, do you think that we'd be getting good value from this group?
I think that there's an absence of another, another nonprofit that does this kind of work. Like it allows us to collaborate regionally, and like there's a lot of fragmentation, and I think that they serve a purpose that no other organization does. So yes.
Yes. So the amount, if it's $4,200 or if it's $5,000 or $8,000, the recommendation of staff would be to participate in this group.
Yes, but they're gonna verify the formula is correct.
Correctly calculated. Some of us have questions about the calculation,
However,
but I guess what I didn't realize, what Dan said, is that you say our uniform assessment is higher than the.
Proportionately would be higher, yeah.
We're not doing it on proportion, we're doing it on gross assessment.
So I guess my point is that if Model has twice the population, they wouldn't have twice the uniform assessment. They would have something less than that, or
But their assessment is higher than ours. Their total.
higher, but their
not this-
total assessment, but yeah. I think what needs to be done is we just need to verify the numbers. It doesn't, it's no point in me saying it looks right, because I would have to see the formula, but it's,
That's what we're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, so our approval is subject to the numbers being correct.
Just a clarification, Derek, I was off 1%, it's 26.
You're good. You're good.
I'm just recollecting, I know it's Lunenburg County, but like the senior safety formula and the social public library formula. And when I think of those budgets in front of me, because those are two boards that I'm on, there is a bit more of a differential, it seems, jumping out at me for District of Chester and District of Lunenburg, but I'm in favor of the line item, whether it's 42 or 8,000 or whatever it might be. And I can also jump in on the question that Councillor Nino asked you. I've heard positive comments as well as urging on my behalf for me to support this in terms of, let's just use the Ross Farm Museum as an example. And they are an anchor destination, an anchor participant tourism as well as economic development driver. So that I have support in the community, and even though we're way in there, if you will. But yeah, so no, it's a good thing. SSTC.
All those in favor of the motion? Opposed, motion's carried.
I asked Mr. Warden that the calculation be shared with us, just so for our education.
Absolutely, it'll be shared. Just because, I wonder, is 6.3 time sensitive? I'm wondering if we could move it to the next meeting.
Which one?
6.3. Just because I have some questions I haven't had an opportunity to get answered for myself.
Signage.
No, it's not time sensitive.
Does anybody object to it being moved?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I just have some information I want to get, I haven't got. 6.4, Community Development Recreation Municipal Grants Program. Oh. Well,
I'm kidding.
no, but, well, I wouldn't go to that too.
You might be surprised.
Yeah. Bear with me. I got it. I'm not worried.
Kids got a lot of paper, buddy.
got paper.
You got paper.
Just wait till I find-
Yeah, so one of the things that I did is I created, in addition to the report, I created kind of a worksheet for you. So it's kind of a summary, so maybe if you want to take one and pass it along, it might be helpful with going through this conversation.
I like the big print. Thank you.
I knew you would.
Thank you.
So essentially what you're looking at in front of you this morning is a continuation of the discussion around our grants program. And so the way the report is outlined is the background piece is essentially a summary of all the suggestions that we talked about at the initial two workshops. And so those are kind of summarized in those points. And then there was also some discussion on a couple of points that you were looking for some additional information. And one of those was on budgeted grants, partly a conversation that just happened. So we have that piece of it. And then as well, a few other follow-up questions such as the eligibility. So what groups, how many grants can they apply for, and which grants can they apply for in a given year? So I guess so I'm not sure exactly how you want to tackle this. If you would like to do a quick review of what was discussed so far, maybe as a starting point, and then a couple of unanswered questions. Is that good? Okay, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on these. If not, so I'll run through them. And if folks have questions or want to discuss, just jump in and let me know. So eligibility for grants, so we've talked around groups do not need to be officially registered, they need to be an organized group, but not officially registered through joint stocks. And any groups that are not officially registered, that the most that they can receive in any grant is $3,000. Good?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna transition the former council grant into an operating grant. So no longer will groups be able to apply for capital through that operating grant, will be strictly for operational. And that the budget would be set at $33,000, which of course is a combination of the former tourism grant, $8,000, and the council grant, which is $25,000. So that's again, we get into budget time. we can, you can set the budget at whatever you wish, but that was some of the guidance that was given so far. In addition, there was formerly 2 deadlines every year, and now you'd like to switch that to 1 deadline a year, which would be April the 30th.
Yeah.
Sound good? Okay. Tourism grants, so we're gonna remove the tourism grant, and those groups, so we're not saying that any of the groups that apply for tourism grants before aren't eligible, they are, and it would just be through one of the other programs, so that tourism grant has been removed. The district grant, so we do need to create some basic guidelines, so currently there's no guidelines, so we're going to do that. We're going to improve the current application form to add a couple of questions so that council has a little bit more information on what the application is including. In addition to providing additional space in the forms. We're going to keep the budget at $10,000 per district, so an overall budget of $70,000 for the upcoming year. And we're going to remove the February 28th deadline, but that application will be dealt with in the fiscal year in which they are received.
Sorry, repeat that again.
There was a deadline of February 28th, and council decided to remove that deadline, and essentially that
Deal with
the application will be dealt with in the fiscal year in which they are received. So just that whole end of fiscal year, start of the next fiscal.
Anyone questions?
Okay, small capital was the new grant that we've created, and essentially to cover off those small grant capital projects. And that budget will be set at 25,000. And so there's a really important connection here with the major project. So the major project, we talked about having a budget of 250,000.
Yeah.
And the small capital of 25,000. So that would give us a total budget of capital spending in any given year of 275,000.
Yes.
Okay. So major project, again, just to review, the 250,000 would be the most, the kind of cap on the budget, with each individual project being a minimum of 10,000 or a maximum of 100,000, and not to exceed that $275,000 limit. And so just for a little bit of context around that, so it was one of the questions around, so what are our exact kind of budget figures? So I put those in there, did a little bit of research. So we have just a little over $1 million in the reserve currently right now, and that's the 1/3 for community development. And so the funds allocated for this year were about 414,000. And so annually, the revenue that we generate from wind revenue is about 325,000. So all that math essentially works out. If you set your budget at 275,000,
We're still building the fund.
that reserve will continue to grow, and you will meet that threshold of wanting to keep $500,000 in that reserve at any given year.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was just confirmation of all that discussion from the last meeting. Recreation grant, again, there was a criterion there that groups need to be registered, so we'll be consistent throughout all of our grants, so groups will not have that requirement. There was a suggestion to increase the budget from 20,000 to 25,000 for the upcoming fiscal year.
Yeah.
And as well, so it's not on your sheet, but there was another suggestion that was that the maximum budget for a recreation grant should be 3,000. This is just an addition that I brought up. We've recently gone through the recreation grant process. And because that budget is only 20,000 or 25,000, if we have a group, so this year we had a group, for example, submitted a request for $5,000, that would be a quarter of the budget on one application. So the suggestion was it didn't make sense to not have a ceiling. So that ceiling of $3,000 for recreation grants, which is consistent with some of our others. So not included on your worksheet, but from the discussion from the last on the trails grant. So we've had some discussion on that, and the suggestion was that there would be no separate trails grant program established, and that the community groups, those community trail groups, will be eligible for any of the grant program that we have established to date. And that there was also a notice there that there would be a preference for the easement to be in place to protect the investment of public funds into those trails that are developed on private land. So currently, I know.
Well, they would at least need the easement in place.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So currently, we'll use the New Rush Trails as an example.
I don't need to comment.
So there's there's an MOU in place for that particular
Yeah,
group.
we like it, legal easement. Would be preferable.
The preference, yeah, it would be the preference. So I guess there may need to be a little bit clarity. So the preference is there. So are we saying that is a preference, but then we will still accept an application from a group that has an MOU?
think that if we're gonna require easements, then I wouldn't wanna cut off good work. That is beneficial to the community, because that can be a problem. But I think that we may wish, if that's the wish of council, then you may want to set thresholds where you can give some amount of money up to a certain amount if you don't have one in place, but if you have an easement in place, then you can go
You
beyond.
can get a larger.
Because then that large investment would be protected.
Yeah.
That's, I think that's what council was in our last
I think
discussion.
that was the general intent, is that, yeah, if you need a couple $1,000s to do this, but if you want $150,000, then we want an easement in place.
Well, that would be a major problem.
No, but that's what I'm just saying.
You need a number.
I think we need to look at every one on its own merits and see what the risk.
Well,
is.
of course you do, but
I wouldn't put a monetary number on, I think just maybe we should, all right?
There has to be some.
well, I think all he's saying is that we're not saying that if you don't have an easement, you can't get a small grant to help you with the maintenance of the trail or development of the trail. But if you're looking for a lot of money, we're gonna use easement as one of the criteria, which was gonna help us decide whether or not you're gonna get it.
We might, just on that point, we might want to actually look at the arrangement with the private landowner. In terms of, it may not be an easement, but it may be for a term, or there may be
A license of some
a
sort.
license of some sort that can't be canceled overnight. You know what I mean? It would be a year.
We're looking at the security of the investment.
Exactly. So I think that's what you want to look at.
And so
Something like
there's
say, I don't
detail.
make- An easement is forever. So the landowner may say, I don't want to make it forever.
But you get it for 25 years.
Exactly, or something like that. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, that's pretty good, you know, because the capital investment will be probably used up in 25 years.
So I think some of the discussion that we've had in the past on this topic and that they're looking at the model that's used in other areas around the province within the MOU is pretty consistently used in a lot of different cases. So to your point, Sam, is that each of those MOUs would potentially be set up a little bit differently. It would have different terms. So perhaps some of the criteria is to look at some of the details in the MOU. And if there's if the agreement is only in place for a year, then maybe council isn't as comfortable as whether that agreement is in place for 25 years or 10
And if
years.
it's for
or
5 years,
whatever
we
it
would
is.
might be interested in giving you some, but we're probably not gonna give you enormous amounts because it's 5 years done.
Tina, is that helpful to you?
No,
Oh, okay.
no. This group here knows the story of the MOUs.
Yeah,
We use the example.
yeah. No, that's
We,
okay.
thank you for asking, because I didn't intend to comment at all, because this group knows the story. It's on the live stream, we know that. And it's certainly been very disheartening to the New Ross Trail Society, which is the only organized group in the municipality to date. And I say that because they worked through the process over the last, since major project deliberation, working with staff here, looking at other similar MOUs. Again, you know the story. We replicated MOUs that were done with the province of Nova Scotia and other municipal units with private landowners. And my group fails to understand why this council and why this municipality thinks that there needs to be additional words, additional times, additional lengths of agreements. They have yet to understand. And I am not able to explain that to them, why we think at this table we need to put in place, because it's all public money, whether it's here or provincially. So, thank you for asking.
Part of the reason is to ensure that public money is being spent and secured.
Absolutely, which is what all the MOUs do around the province.
Well, like Andre's suggesting, that yes, if you don't have an easement, we still probably would support you to a level, but at a higher level if you have it.
That's why I asked,
Thank
because
you.
I thought that might. Okay,
Because we want to know that
sure.
our investments are secure.
So I guess that the question is for the grant intake process, those trail groups would need to know in terms of what they apply for and staff giving direction. So is council going to deal with these kind of on an individual basis, suggest, or do we need to come up with a
a threshold of funds that if you don't have an easement in place, then you're eligible for X amount of dollars, or if you do have an easement, then you'd be eligible for.
Would
a
you be
different amount.
eligible for the major project grants, I'd say, if you have the easements in place, if you're not? I mean, I
Then it would
don't
be
know, I'm
small
only
cap.
speaking from what I heard around the discussion. when we do it. But if you're looking for just a smaller grant, then we could probably consider those without the easements in place. That's where I thought they were. What are you looking for from us today?
So I guess
Approval
that,
of all this?
yeah, so there's more, so I'm not sure if you want to.
Oh, yeah, no,
Okay.
I don't want to, but I know we have to.
So that was kind of a summary of some of the suggestions to date. And then one of the questions that came up was around the annual budgeted grants. And so council had asked for additional information on the items that we currently have within the budgeted grant and what those are and how they get on the list. And so there's a summary in the report of each of the 6 groups that received a budgeted grant and the basis for which they were added. So there's no consistent message here is basically what the answer is that each of those were added at various different times for various different circumstances. Some of those groups that we have agreements, the funding is tied to agreements. So for example, Church Memorial Park, Card Lake Park, there's agreements in place that they're tied to. Other ones, the groups would have come to us because they provide a core service like senior safety, community wheels, and council felt at the time that was a really important service that we want to support on an annual basis. Very much similar to the discussion that you just had prior to this around social tourism. So that was one of the groups that was that I mentioned here that was a request come in and you need to make a decision. Council took into consideration all the factors and decided to add them as a budgeted grant. So that's how it's been done in the past. So if you want to continue in that manner and just if there's a group that you feel provides a core service and you want to support on an annual basis, you can do that. Or if you would like to develop some type of criteria, then there's a possibility of doing that, and maybe a little bit challenging to do that. So I suspect maybe that's the direction that you would want to go is deal with those on a case by case basis.
Well, I think that we
I'm
can
sure.
do that, yeah. I mean, we have to come up with a criteria in our heads of some sort.
You have to do something.
Makes you eligible, but.
So one of the things that raised this issue was the Chester Art Center.
Yeah.
I think that in principle, I think this council approved 25,000 or something potentially, which I think would be great.
That was capital grant, yeah.
No, they separately came.
Oh,
into
separate.
capital.
So, yeah.
And we're gonna get there in a second. But it was to provide some operational money so that I think we had been giving them on an annual basis some help. And it's in our strategic plan to support the art sector. It's massively important to our communities in all of our districts. And I think that we don't really have to get into a debate of the value of art.
Yeah.
Our lives are a lot worse off without it. So we know that. I think the question was then if we have something, for example, like the Brink or whatever that is, getting a budgeted grant, which we see value and ongoing value on an annual basis and providing, and then they wish to improve their facility or do some sort of very important, who knows, I mean, let's say the Rink needs to do something major and they come, are we going to stop providing them operational money, which we do annually? So if that happens, are we going to deny them operational money? And there was a bit of a debate, an exciting one, I believe, some 8 months ago. And we need to, I think we need to complete that conversation.
Didn't we decide that they would be eligible for both?
No, we did not.
We did
No,
not.
we did not.
No,
Did we have a vote?
we just, no, we
We
just,
just-
we
just a
just,
discussion.
it just was,
We just all stormed away.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
refer
We-
to this meeting.
Yeah,
But, it's very important because when you think about it in terms of other facilities we do support, it's not hard to imagine a scenario whereby there will be a need in the future that they will come looking for some other type of grant.
Yeah. We've
and
made
you don't.
exceptions in the past.
So I guess there's two different ways to handle this. One would be you would make those groups eligible for more than one grant. So you'd make them eligible for a capital as well as a operating or budgeted grant. The other way to do it, and which we have done in the past with Church Memorial Park, is that we've said, okay, you receive a budgeted grant. If you have a project that you know that is in capital in nature and you require more, you just make an adjustment to that budgeted grant for that one particular year. So if they're, so for using the art center, if their budget grant was 25,000, they had a capital project in the course of a year, you might change that budgeted grant to 50,000 for just for that 1 year. And the following year, they would go back to their 25,000. So that would be the second way to handle that. So there's really two options on how to.
Here, if I can just jump in, please, for a moment. Is that, you know, these are, if you find yourself on this budgeted grant, like line item, we're planning to support you annually in perpetuity until something changes. So your values are that well aligned with our values that we know, without even really discussing it, we're going to support you.
Yeah.
And now you come to us and you say, not only are we doing this thing now, which is completely aligned with what you want for this municipality, but we're going to improve the service. And then I just can't imagine that our policy would be to say, whoa, then we can't give you the operational money. Oh, no. Not for another year. That makes no sense. They're offering to improve on the thing that we already support. And that's the situation we find ourselves with the art center. Now we have something that's grown and really is building momentum and it's improving and there's value there and we recognize it. And we can't then cut off the operational funding that they need just so that they can continue to operate something in an improved capacity next year once they've gotten this capital improvement.
Okay, so if let's say we agree to give them an annual grant, it's just a line item. And they apply for capital grants, then it should come out of our capital grants budget. So that they're competing with everybody else who thinks they need them.
Correct.
That's fair.
So I don't really have a big issue with that. I'm starting to wonder where it all stops, and of course, that's always where I am. You know, because like who else, like, let's say there's another art center.
The Chester Playhouse probably.
Or whatever, I mean, there's a limit, I guess, is my concern with not having any clear understanding of what to do. I know that we're politicians and we make our decisions based on that. And I can live with it because I do it myself, but you know, I just, somewheres along the line, how many people are we going to give?
Big grant. So that directly ties to the last question today, which is exactly this, is what groups can, which grants
Who's
can a
eligible,
group
who's
apply
not,
for?
and that's the
So
problem.
it was fairly simple in the past that you could receive one grant per fiscal year per group. And then the district grants were added, and then it was like, okay, you can get any grant in addition to a district grant.
Yeah,
And so now we're in this situation, based on what Andre is describing, is that perhaps that doesn't make sense. And so we need some clear direction on what groups can, what grants can a group apply for. So could they apply for, an operating grant, capital grant, and a district grant on the same year?
well, I find the
or
district
not?
grants totally different, because some of them, in many respects, were given to people who aren't even eligible for grants in the first place. Because they're organizations that don't meet any of the other criteria, or they're just a one-day off event or something like that. So I don't see them as being part of it. But it's who, how do we determine who is such a valuable organization that we're just gonna give you money without asking, like almost, like it's just a line item.
Yeah, but we just give them two large grants, right? One for this year, one for next, am I wrong? Didn't
Yeah,
we just
tender.
approve the two? Yeah.
We approved one grant that will be distributed over two fiscal
Over a
years.
2-year period.
Yes.
For next year, okay.
Yes.
So I guess part of the problem I had with it is we were restricted to other groups that they can only apply for one grant a year, like major grants and those things, they get the little ones, right or wrong?
Yep.
So we approve this one, we really restricted the other groups, and we're making an exception for this group. Do we make exceptions for every group?
Well, so I think that is the decision that we're making right now, is it needs to be consistent for.
I have another question here too. Did they have put in for this? Did this particular group put in for this grant? Did they apply for a
For-
$25,000 a year and extra?
So there was a letter of request that came in during our budget deliberations in the spring, and council,
Along with that one, with the 50,000?
yes.
See, I don't really mind putting them on the list. I understand it. Our district, strategic priority for us, all that kind of
It's a big
stuff.
number.
Yeah, but I had, my question is really around how many grants in one year can you get? If you're on that list, that's supposed to get you by. I don't mind if they apply for a capital grant, but there needs to be some methodology for why we give people two instead of one.
I look at this capital, like in the criteria here for major capital grant, is to support new construction and capital upgrades. So you can deliver the service in an enhanced way.
Yeah.
But that's completely separate from the operational aspect of the other ones. So the other ones are you're operating your programs, you're engaging with the community. And then this other bin is like, okay, now we want to improve the mechanism by which we offer that service. You don't want to interrupt the delivery of service while you make the upgrade. You want to continue on. So that's, to me, they're separate and distinct, and you're not going to see like an art center put a new piece on their building every other year just so they can take advantage of multiple. This is an opportunity for them to grow and deliver a better service going forward.
I don't really have an issue with it.
Do they pay for service? Like, do they charge a fee to the people who?
Some things they do, some things
If
they
they have to
don't.
bring in an artist or something and they have to compensate that person or something, that is nominal.
Yeah,
It's very accessible.
I think he's asking the participants pay.
Yeah, and that's what I'm answering.
Right, you go to the
Someone
daycare.
someone
you
takes
pay
them,
for it.
someone
yes,
goes in
they
on
do,
that.
people do, yeah, so if they set
So
up a.
it's like subsidizing this stuff.
Yes.
That's what we're looking at.
Oh, yeah, it's accessible by ordinary
I
funds.
was just asking what
They
it-
do charge for
For workshop.
for
You
workshop.
do like an art, yeah, like watercolors or something like that.
They charge.
Some $50 or something.
Tina?
Thank you. I spoke in favor when Sue was here and it was brought up. I'm not sure if it was 8 months ago, but you referenced 8 months ago. So whenever it was during budget deliberation, I see the Chester Art Center as doing phenomenal outreach work, and I don't think any of us disagree, but outreach work, actual measurable outreach work
Yeah.
in all of the areas of the municipality. So I do see it as a municipal resource, municipal facility, and I am in support of adding them or considering them for addition to this line item, regular line item for consistency of planning and budgeting on their part and so on. So I'm just putting that out there because I don't know where we are really in the discussion with that, but I am in favor. I was before and I am
Yeah.
still.
I'm in favor of it too. It's just a question of how much and how do we determine, like. I know that we do a lot of things just because we decide to do it. But I mean, the size of the operation, their operating budget, their expenditures required to keep it open should have some bearing on the amounts that we get.
Did they not submit their budget at that time?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah,
We have copies up there.
That's for their operating.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah. For the line item.
Making them eligible for capital.
For other-
Yeah.
So.
no, but even on the line item side, somewheres, the amount that you give a person for the line item should have some relevance to
What they can apply for.
what their expenditures are.
Well, we have a maximum now of 100,000.
There's no maximum with the budget grants, it's been a case by.
Like,
case
obviously,
basis.
you give the rink a
yeah.
significant, a
As opposed
significant
to-
line item because their expenditures are enormous. You know,
Budgeted grant as opposed to a major capital.
yeah, so that's where we
It's
really.
basically to prevent, so that they can rely on it, so that they can, you
Yeah,
don't
and I
have
don't
to
have
continuously
any-
come back begging every year.
How much
because-
are they asking?
So in the discussion at budget time, we put $25,000 in the budget to come back to council to talk about it, so that was kind of just a placeholder, so.
Was that your request from Sue LeBlanc, 25,000, or that's just a number you?
That was the amount that was discussed when the letter, when they submitted their.
Yeah, okay, so how much are we giving to, well, Card Lake Park, we own the damn thing.
We're giving the daycare, I don't even know why.
So community wheels is $10,000 currently, the Lindbergh County Senior Safety, I think it would never right off, I think it's around 4 or 5,000, I think.
4 or 5.
And then the 3 resource centers are $5,000 each.
So 25 seems out of
whack.
out of whack based on
Definitely.
that kind of stuff.
In what way?
I just.
Well, it's just too much.
I'm just, I know, I think the question that we're asking is which grants are groups eligible for?
Yes.
So if council endorses both an operating and a capital grant, I think the budgeted grant would be considered operating. What I would propose then is, if that's what you endorse, we would come back with the financials that the Arts Center submitted, and you would make a decision on a budgeted grant.
Yeah.
But if you don't approve both an operating and a capital grant, then I think the Arts Center will have to consider its approach to council. Will it come back and just ask for a budgeted grant, the same way that the Church Memorial Park has? That includes both. I think the first question you have to answer is are groups eligible for both an operating and a capital grant? And if they are, we would bring back the operating grant for the Arts Center. I think that's a logical way to.
We sort of set a precedent already, in my mind, anyway, and when our daycares, we give them $5,000 a year. And we put a condition there that they receive $5,000 a year. If they want to apply for another grant, they lose that grant in the year they apply for, because they're not allowed to get two. That's someone who gets a line item. That's why I kept referring to, we give them the 50,000, whatever, and we're sort of making exceptions for one group and not the other. It's this group here, if it's Chester Area Family Resource Center wants to put in for the large grant, they make themselves eligible and they turn that $5,000 that they get annually is not a line item, it's gone. That's a condition of getting the line item.
Does that disappear
If they would like to put in.
just for that year? Okay.
If they want to put in for a large grant in the upcoming year, then they forfeit the $5,000.
The line item in the
line
budget,
item.
but not the following year.
That's a precedent.
Yeah, okay.
But we've set that precedent. To me, we set the precedent, and these organizations have lived with that precedent. And I think it's,
Just because it didn't make sense then, doesn't mean it should continue.
well, we can't treat one organization or 3 organizations one way and the rest of them another way, in my mind.
So thank you. So just as a question of setting precedent. So the year that, and we have Church Memorial Park as a line item for operating. And so remind me again the year that they came in and asked for and requested a major project. I think it was for 100,000 that year.
Probably 18.
I thought it was a bit of a different line.
We increased the amount
just
of budget we
increased
gave
their
them for that
annual-
particular year.
So we have them as a line item right, every year. And they came in and were eligible to apply and sat in front of us, and we considered their major project request and made the decision that year to approve both. And worded it
Yes, a
so
line.
that we actually gave them a line item of whatever those 2 amounts total.
Correct.
And then the
Because of
next
the
year, there was no doubt, it was still continuing on as a regular line item of
Then
75,000.
we went back the following year, the ordinary line. item.
Just wondering in terms of talking with precedents and so on, so.
Well, I think you know exactly what you're saying. So don't talk to me about precedent. When you'll do that for the rent, it's exactly the same scenario. I mean, we could talk about the daycares. The daycare, like providing childcare, I would argue is not actually a municipal mandate.
I would totally agree with you, really.
So here we are, and we're giving $5,000 a year. Two separate daycares, $10,000.
Three.
$15,000,
That's not
annually.
daycare, So, but New Ross is not
And-
daycare,
and it's not even within our limits.
so it's not,
And we've identified this as
it's not daycare.
is one of our sector strategies we want to grow. It's in the 2014 report. Please explain to me what investments we've made. What is this? What has this council, what investment have we made? And we're arguing that $25,000 a year to support a strategy we endorsed as a council 8 years ago. We spent, I believe, almost $0 to support that. And here they are asking for $25,000 a year, which is money well spent, in my view. Everybody's saying the same thing.
I don't mind adding them to the list of those who are just line items. I just want some rationale for the amount, which staff are gonna come back for, like.
It may not be 25, maybe it'll be
Maybe
10,
it's
200,
200,
I don't know.
maybe it'll be
Maybe
50, maybe it'll be 50.
Yeah.
50 would be-
But I just think
Yeah,
there
that's
needs to be some kind of logic in that, in who gets what based on their operating
Yeah,
budget.
suggestion.
I think it was too. Come back and tell us that. And as for the capital budget, and whether you're eligible for a capital budget at the same time you get a line item budget, that's a decision we have to make.
Well, I think if someone's,
You can always say no, so.
well,
I
that's
don't
right,
care.
you can allow them to apply, but
Whether-
it's ultimately our
And
decision.
it comes right out of the ordinary capital grants.
That's
And
things
that will
that I- that's
determine
things-
who gets what.
It's the live stream.
Yeah.
Because again, consistency of decision making.
One question, just to change the channel for a minute. Is there a reason we don't have a budget for budgeted grants?
And that's essentially back to the discussion that we just had, is that every.
There's a logical reason for that.
Yeah, so the logical reason is that council has dealt with those on a yearly, annual,
I
case by case basis.
I
So
understand
we have
that.
not ever set a budgeted amount.
Are we concerned if we put a budget that we're going to be forced to spend that amount?
No, I think we budget for what we know we're gonna give.
Yes.
And anything else, any other requests would come in that would have to be in the following year's budget, because we haven't budgeted for it.
There's no limit.
Not at the moment, it's only what council sets,
Yeah, that's why.
based on the availability of resources, based on the tax rate.
Yeah, so with currently with the budgeted grant, there's no written down official criteria similar to the other ones. They just have been dealt with on a case by case basis.
Yeah. I think, like, in my view, arts is important enough to be added, it's just that. What, you know, what is,
Can I just bring up the daycares again, because I think we support daycares as a way of supporting the parents and their fees.
trying to help our
And I
citizens.
met with the daycares last week because I know this discussion's coming up. And as of January 2023, the daycares are going to be supported by the government, federal government. And that's going to have a huge impact on the fees that are charged. And I'll give an example. In an infant, I think it was a week was $172. Now it'll be $67. And for a toddler, it was $161. It'll be $71. Preschool $155. We're down to $68. School age after school was 69, now 26, and the school age full day was 159, and now it'll be 82. So I think that the parents are getting a great subsidy. The costs are going to be probably reduced to less than half. I'm not even sure if we should be continuing.
I don't think
That's
so.
something I don't know. I just went back. I want to throw those numbers out because we had a discussion before. I think
I agree.
So just one point of clarification, when we talk about those three groups, is that the Chester River Family Resource Center through the years are daycares. The New Ross is a little
Yes.
different. So New Ross isn't a daycare, but they provide space for the daycare to operate. They do a whole host of other.
Yeah.
No, so
We actually
New
own the
Ross,
building.
That's right.
yeah, New Ross functions different than the other two, but
Well,
they're,
I know, when I looked at their budgets, a good point, their budget's 150, the other ones are 790 and 850, so we give them the same amount as one with.
For the daycare piece, which
Yeah,
the
that's right.
daycare doesn't even come into play with the Family Resource Center. New
I
Ross.
just think they need to be discussed.
Yeah. Well, let's do that later. Let's try to get through this other piece first.
Here's your 10,000.
So you're gonna come back with some rationale for the the line item people in their budgets. Or something for us to talk about.
On the Chester Art Center.
Yes.
That's the direction. We would come back with the information they gave us on their budget,
And we already have it for the
capital and operating.
Well, I just
I think
want to
that's
get,
fair.
I just want a rationale for why one gets this much, one gets that much, one gets this.
Yeah, and so I don't know.
No, it has to be based on the
It
operating
does,
costs.
yes, I agree.
Should be.
But I'm just saying that I don't know that that's how the decisions have been made
I
to date,
know.
but you do.
I'd like
I
to see it.
I understand that you're looking for that
I'd like
information to make a decision in this particular case, so we can, I
I'd
can
like
collect
to
that
make it based
information.
on exact cost.
So I guess back to Dan's earlier point, we can do that for that group. I guess we still need to figure out,
Are you eligible
are
for
they
capital?
eligible? Because if we determine that groups are not eligible for operating capital in the same year, then that's a pointless conversation.
Well,
We can bring
somebody's
that
gotta
They're
tell me.
eligible, 'cause we've done it. They're eligible. We've done it with the rate. Right?
Be in a roundabout way.
We have done it. Decision
Yeah,
was
we
made.
found a way to do it.
Okay, I'm just looking for clarification.
But I don't
I would say they're eligible, it's just that they gotta apply for the same process as every other person who applies for a capital grant, and we'll determine whether or not we give it to them or not based on the amount of money that's being asked for and how much we have to spend.
Okay, so groups are eligible for both
That's
capital
all you
and
need.
operating. and any-
No, they're not. We need to, no, I'm saying they're not, because we need to accept it. Andre just said here a minute ago, we talked about J-class roads. Does this table have the ability to change their mind, do something outside the box we always have? But are we gonna make them eligible every year? That's a different question. Can you, yes, Tara, go ahead. I know you're doing big.
No, I don't know if this will help the conversation or
I
not.
hope it does.
Previously, we had council grants, district grants. They were eligible for a district grant as,
Yes.
but council grants, and we had major capital. We didn't have the small capital. So council grants were both small capital and programming and operating.
Yeah.
Now that you're changing it and you've got the sustained operating that are the budgeted ones, right? So you provide sustained operating. It might change the discussion if you were to say, are they eligible for the small capital and the major capital, but not the operating for the programming side?
Oh, they shouldn't be, if
So,
they're getting, they
it
can't
just
get
might-
every.
Before, we said that because the small capital was rolled into the council grants. This makes that a little clearer now. I don't know if
To my
that-
mind, if I can, to my mind, if you're budgeted in, so we're sustaining your operating, you see value, you're aligned with our mandate. Then it would rule out everything except for the major capital, pretty well. To me,
And that's.
that's when that's like a facility improvement to help deliver the service better. But you shouldn't then come for small capital grant, because you know, you gotta
Or
sweep
other
the door or something,
operating
you gotta fix
grants,
or
no.
whatever, take that out of your budget grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I agree with that sentiment. I just, if you're doing a major facility upgrade, you're not gonna be coming every year looking for those. You're gonna come once in maybe every 20 years or something, because you've grown and you're succeeding.
Yeah.
And we wanna help you with that. We don't wanna stop you from operating for that year.
So just a real life example of that. So we had Community Wheels in there. So Community Wheels is a budgeted grant. So if they decided next year that they needed to purchase a new vehicle, and that was a major project, that they would apply, they could apply for a major project, but nothing else, just a major
That's
project. Okay? That's good.
But
That's good
we
clarity.
haven't decided that, it's just, but somebody has to make a motion to do something.
So just that I understand, from your
Well, I mean, we
example,
gotta come to a
so if they
conclusion.
apply for that capital grant, that their line item is gone for that year?
No,
No, that's not what we're saying.
You still get to operate,
You still-
even if you
okay.
need a new van.
Okay,
so the discussion
Except for
around,
Florida.
the decision
Oh,
we
no
need
need
to
to go
make is if you are getting a line item grant, are you eligible for a large capital grant in the same year? That's the decision we're trying to make. And
I don't agree
At
with
some
that.
point in time, I need a motion to say yay or nay, so that we can move on.
I just think if you have a budget, my opinion is if you have a budgeted item every year, you should be able to look after your business in a way that lets you do whatever you want to, if it takes 4 years, if it takes 5 years. Everybody knows that I think our grants are way out of whack anyway, but if we put the theater on as a line item, I'm all in favor of that. But I just want to keep, if you get a granted line item and you apply for a major capital grant, that should disqualify you from that line item for that year. So that's the way it is now, right?
So being on the board of CMP, what do you think of that?
Well, I know that circumstance where they needed that extra money, they came here, and yes.
The sprinkler system.
So I just asked, so again, that is very, what it's, Councilor Ace has been suggesting is very clear. Are you on board with that discussion? I'm not in terms of that, because I agreed with when Church Memorial Park came in that year. And we looked at it, we considered it.
No water.
So again, we've got some things coming up, right?
I think there are
Not a
extenuating
problem,
circumstances.
you're,
Always that.
Yes,
I
and
guess
then
you gotta look at the situation.
Extenuating circumstances.
Well, I think,
That
I
was.
think the ring
It
was.
just as a Fortis Community Center came in and they needed a new roof.
As
or-
as
and we
was the
have
playhouse because
three-
it burnt down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
Always
those are,
make exceptions.
those are exceptions.
Those are- I-
The roof is leaking and they needed it fixed.
Well, here's the thing. The arena is an excellent example because it is at the end of its life.
Yeah, and they're gonna be coming here
And they're gonna
soon.
come in the very, you can see it on the horizon, they're gonna be coming and they're gonna ask for a big bag of money. So the year they come out with that, asking for that big money, I want on the record, for those who oppose
That's
this,
right.
for you to say
Yeah.
that you will not give them operational money that year, only the capital. That's what I'm hearing? Say it.
That's what it
I
does,
don't
you
think
said,
that's
for
what you
sure.
heard. I
Yeah,
think you
no.
heard us say that when someone came with an emergency or extenuating circumstances, this council said, listen.
There won't be an emergency. They've had it, they've known since 2002 that that building was on life support.
Well, you know, they can easily hand over the keys. They're working on
That's what we were trying to avoid.
developing a plan. I mean, it's the roof and you know very well the beams and the, you know, it has to be safe. It's gonna be a safety issue when they're working.
Are we gonna give them capital and operator? Yes or no, when they come?
We know it's happening.
Yes or no?
It's not.
We don't know
exciting.
Don't know, haven't heard it.
I don't know.
haven't, you know, I'm not gonna answer that.
People, we have a decision to make. Are you eligible for a capital grant as well as a line item grant, or are you not? And council has to decide.
Well, I think it's simple.
I do too.
I think it's simple. Yes, they can apply, but if, depending on the circumstance, it's up to us to decide if it's
It always
essential.
is.
Yes,
Oh, I agree with that.
Yes.
But what we're saying, are you disqualified immediately?
Right.
Because you have
Can
operator.
you not even apply? That's the question.
The answer is no.
So if
You're
the
not
answer is no, if it,
You're not disqualified.
they're not
it's, well,
disqualified.
okay, so if they're eligible, it'd be nice to have it on record that there was a motion that said you are. Of course, it's at the discretion of council.
Make a motion.
And if we're not, then I need that motion. I need something.
Well, if we didn't do it, we don't need a motion. But,
Well, it's unclear, quite frankly, based on our
It's a
past
bit
murky.
murky.
well, it wasn't unclear to some people that they were told they were not allowed.
I know,
to
that was my understanding too, but I also realized that we made an exception.
But we're always gonna make exceptions. When
Yes.
people come in with extenuating circumstances, our hands are not tied, that we can't make a decision. I hope to never get tied. That we can't sit here and make a decision that's gonna help organization like the rink. I would hope we would never put ourselves in that.
Well, I
position.
need somebody to make a motion, either they are or they are not eligible.
I move they're eligible
Second.
to apply.
Discussion
Eligible to apply.
For a second grant? The second-
For a
For
major,
the capital.
for a major
Major
capital,
That's the motion. That's all. I-
if they're budgeted.
Those in favor,
I have no problem with that.
opposed, motion's carried. So you, but
We
how
can
much
make our
they get
decision.
for the
Because we can make our decision.
line item?
We'll
I
bring
still-
that
We still need an amount. We haven't determined.
Okay, we're taking a 10-minute
Can I
break.
just ask a question for you?
Yes, okay.
I need to be clear, that's all the daycares and the pools are all eligible.
Anyone who gets a line item grant at the moment is eligible to make application for a capital
Will
grant.
you make that clear to the organizations, or do we have to count with?
Yeah, so whatever, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take all the decisions that are made, we have to repackage it, and that will all be sent out to all of our.
See what happens.
Well,
And I think Floyd, to your point with the daycare, we have to revisit that. Because in our budget next, because in 23, as you say, the federal government's gonna be kicking in a lot of money. So we shouldn't have to be kicking in here.
Well,
The daycares still get the same amount of money coming in as if the parents are paying.
It's
So
the
the
parents who are getting the
subsidized, I
parents
benefit.
are in a better financial
Oh, it
position than
doesn't.
the daycare.
Okay.
They're
Just the
getting
parents,
fees.
the parents are
Someone
getting the
else is
benefit.
paying the fee.
So you guys, I mean, I don't have daycares in my area, so, but how do you feel about it? That's what you got them in your area.
To me, if we reduced our funding, they might have to charge the parents just a bit more.
Well,
Make up the $5,000 or
They're not
something.
allowed.
Not allowed.
What?
They're not allowed.
They have to find the resources somewhere.
Yeah, they're not allowed.
So if you're gonna have any more kids, you better.
I'll be honest, if it's a line item or not, they're eligible now to put in for
A grant anyway.
in 2 or 3 grants, so that's
They can
fine.
apply for anything they
Take
want.
the line item away, let's put in for 22.
Yeah.
They're as good a service as most.